As you may know, I have transitioned away from being a contractor, working for companies, and instead building my own business. And what I've realised is it's so difficult to get that work-life balance, and that's why I'm out today. I'm forcing myself to come out and do some exercise and get my heart beating, because it's so easy just to sit at a desk and work and work. You need to get out and have exercise. So we are now walking uphill, hoping that this is going to take me to the area that I want to get to. There may be some heavy breathing in this part of the video as I'm walking up the hill, so just bear with me. One thing that I've started to do is explore during the week, sorry, out of breath, and work at the weekend, because it's so much busier at the weekend than it is during the week. As you can see, it's really quiet here. Ukraine is a very religious country, and you'll see lots of churches in Kiev and also here in Lviv. It's looking like it is time to climb the steps for the observation point, and then we'll get into the pros and cons of working remotely in Ukraine and my first impressions. Right, time to climb up all of these steps to the observatory tower, I think. Still climbing. Oh, I'm glad it's a cool day today. There's a nice breeze blowing. And we keep climbing. I think we've made it to the top, but the views from here aren't brilliant. So, the pros and cons of staying in Ukraine as a remote worker. The first pro is that it is incredibly cheap, very affordable to live. If you saw my apartment video in Kiev, that place cost me £335 for the month. If I'm a bit out of breath, it's because I'm walking around a hillside right now. But public transport is incredibly cheap. For a single ticket you're looking at 20 to 30 pence. Nearly at the top. Got my bottle of water. This cost me about 85 pence. To be honest, it's much cheaper when you're actually away from the touristy areas. But yeah, needed this water. So, pros and cons of living here in Ukraine as a remote worker or digital nomad. I hate that term. I would say there's very few cons. The con for me is definitely I have to be careful when I'm walking around on the paths and crossing the roads, because there are a lot of potholes. Now, you get that in Southeast Asia in most cities, but you don't expect it as much here in Europe. But it definitely is a problem if you are disabled, you use a wheelchair or anything like that, then it might be a problem getting around. I have to say it's more of a problem in Kiev than it is in actual Lviv, where I am right now, even though in Lviv there are lots of cobbled streets, so it's worth bearing that in mind as well. And also, when you're in the centre of the cities, it's not as much of a problem. It's more on the outskirts if you are living outside of the city. That aside, there are many positives about living here. The internet is incredibly fast. I'll give you the speeds of my internet in my apartment later on when I show you around where I'm staying here in Lviv. But in cafes, lots and lots of cafes have got free internet very fast. Some cafes have got plug sockets, which is always a big bonus when you are working remotely. There's also plenty of places to go exploring and walk around and get fresh air. And you can see here what I mean about the cobbled streets. You'll see a lot more of this in the city centre, which is where we're heading next. Whilst the internet is fantastic, there are a number of power cuts. Didn't notice it at all in Kiev, but definitely in Lviv. Every day there's been a power cut, not longer than 15 minutes. Some of them just last a couple of seconds, but if you're in the middle of doing an important piece of work and the electricity goes down, then having a Wi-Fi unit with an unlocked SIM card, a local SIM card, is definitely a wise thing to do. We are now back on street level, so I'm going to give you a walk into the old town to show you what that's like and the different styles of architecture. Loving the graffiti on the walls here. Loving the vehicles here, lots of larders in Ukraine. Let's talk about my first impressions of Ukrainian people, the locals. In Kiev, I found them to be quite abrupt and not very sympathetic that I couldn't speak the local language. And when I say they were abrupt in Kiev, they weren't necessarily rude or anything like that. Didn't have any major problems. It was just like they weren't very helpful if you couldn't speak Ukrainian or Russian. So as you can see, we are now in the city centre, the old town of Lviv. An interesting market around here. I never felt threatened or anything like that, to be honest. It's a really safe place, both Kiev and Lviv. I've walked around at night time and not had any problems. Despite being the capital, Kiev didn't seem as touristy as Lviv. There seems to be many more tourists come here. I loved Kiev because of its character. It was rough around the edges, and I do like those kind of places. Here in Lviv, it feels more European in the architecture and just the atmosphere of the place. Loving the architecture. Look at this door here, all the detail in it. If this video gets 100 likes in 24 hours, what I will do is an exploring video, old school, just random Darren exploring Lviv. I'm back in my apartment, and I know I said I would give you an apartment tour, but I've got some work that I need to get done, and I want to edit this video and get it up on the channel as quickly as possible. So what I'm going to do is do an apartment tour video tomorrow, and I will also include it with some exploring of Lviv. If you would like me to do like a full day explore of the city, then don't forget, 100 likes in 24 hours. Until my next video, take care and travel safe.